All right, builder confidence, it isn't just weak nationally, it's weak in every single region of the country right now as well. In the last episode, I talked about the National Association of Home Builders Wells Fargo Index and how the national numbers are quite weak. And home builder confidence nationally remains weak, and it's been weak for a very long time now, coming up on 2 years. But when you break it down regionally, the story actually gets a little more interesting. It's not just a national issue. It's happening really across the entire country. You can't find a region, at least in the country, that's in good shape. Now, you may be able to break it down into smaller subsections, cities that are doing well, in which you would want to build and develop. And I'm going to talk about that more in the next show. But first, let's get through why this doesn't look good from a regional perspective either. As a reminder, the NAHB, National Association of Home Builders Housing Market Index, HMI, it's a monthly survey measuring current sales, future expectations, and buyer traffic as it relates to what home builders think. And it does look out 6 months, so it's a great forward-looking sort of metric to figure out a lot about housing. And recall that it measures 0 to 100. Any number above 50, builders are optimistic. Any number below 50, home builders are pessimistic. So let's look at regional numbers. And in the Northeast, we'll start there. The number is 44. In the Midwest, the number is 43. In the South, it's 35. And in the West, it's an abysmal 31. So the Northeast would be the strongest, followed by Midwest, followed by South, followed by West. But that being said, they're all low. They're all below 50. So pessimism is abound, even when you look at the various regions. And what stands out immediately to me is that it's not isolated. Even the Midwest and Northeast are below 50. So, in an area where you think it might have been pretty good, it's not. All right, so let's look at it first. Let's look at the weakest, the West, right? 31. And, that's where affordability has been hit the hardest, where higher rates are having probably the biggest impact. I've talked about how you need a really high income to afford a single-family home in the west part of the country. Some of the most expensive areas are in California. Looking at the South, okay, that's also where it's pretty bad, at the number being 35. Remember, 50 is in the middle. The South happens to be the largest housing market in the country, but it's also one of the weakest. So, and these are some fast-growing regions, but even they're not doing that great. So what does it tell us? Why are builders not confident? Builders across the entire country are dealing with several things, a lot of pressures, all at the same time, and not just one, right? I mean, we're going to start with the obvious: mortgage rates. Rates have jumped from 6% to nearly 6.5%, and that obviously impacts affordability. Okay, so demand is dropping for them. So builders lose confidence there. Affordability is stretched. Housing was already expensive relative to incomes and still is. Buyers were already on edge, and higher rates pushed them out even further. So you just have this weak demand. And if you listen to a recent episode I did, it was called The Number of Home Buyers in the Housing Market Falls to a Record Low. That's from March 20th. If you listen to that, you'll see just how weak demand has actually become. And, when demand is that low, it's pretty hard for a home builder to feel confident, right, about starting a new project. Because remember that this index is about, home builders have to be forward thinking, because to start a project, you're 6 to 12 months out, if not longer, depending on the size of the project and the scale. So you don't want to start anything if you don't think they can't afford a home now and rates are going higher, right? So what else are they dealing with? Costs, for sure. Construction costs are still high. They got really high post-pandemic. due to supply constraint issues and inflation and labor, materials, higher than ever before, insurance, all still higher than where they used to be. So that's a challenge. Of course, it costs a lot more to build a home, so you got to try to make it affordable. Some home builders actually will even build things a little bit smaller in square footage just to, try to say, look, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home, but I fit it all in 1,800 square feet just to make their cost per square foot less. So builders dealing with higher costs on one side, weaker demand on the other. Home builders also, for a while, they've been dealing with a lot of regulation, a lot of red tape. That's still very involved in construction. There's still issues that have not been solved. Permitting delays, zoning restrictions. There's a lot of local regulations. All of that just slows down development. And even though there's, look, the White House has tried, there's some efforts there to reduce some of that red tape, but it hasn't been enough. It hasn't been meaningful. Okay, clearly, you can see it in the data. You can see it in the numbers. Builder sentiment is not good. And look, there's uncertainty. There's just uncertainty all around, and probably more than there's ever been here in the last month or two. Remember, they're thinking 6 to 12 months ahead. And right now, with rates going up, demand slowing, the future looks unclear if you're a home builder. So I think when you combine all of those things, it shouldn't be too surprising that builder confidence is pretty weak, even across the entire country. To look at a national number is one thing, to look at regional numbers. So now we're getting it from a regional perspective. Not to say there aren't pockets within those regions that are doing well, where home builders are more confident. And like I said, I'll touch on that more in the next show. But just like I've been saying, if builders aren't confident, they're not building. And if that's happening across all these regions, in a country that's already short roughly, 4 million homes? So that means the supply problem is not getting fixed, right? It's just getting extended. And remember, rates have recently moved from 6 to 6.5%. So that impacts the entire country. That impacts every region. Okay. So I look at this data. Something does come to mind, and I have to say that it's okay. It makes sense that builders would be cautious. I'm not surprised. And unless rates come down, unless there's a little bit more, I think, visibility into the future, it's hard for them. It's hard to see how confidence improves meaningfully, And I think you've got slower. You're gonna probably see slower building activity, limited supply, especially in new construction, continued affordability pressure. And you'll probably notice that it's not going to be fixed anytime soon. It's been 20 months and it probably lingers quite a bit longer. So if I'm a builder, I'm definitely staying cautious, right? I have to understand what I think is, if I'm a builder, I got to really know and understand my specific local market to decide if I'm developing actually makes sense. I can't just go off of, let's just build here because there's land. I got to know, is there demand? Is there going to be demand? Is there growth in this area? And I'm going to talk about that in the next show. I'm going to talk about where there is demand, where there is growth. Because you do have a national environment that's weak, and you got pockets. There's still pockets of opportunity, and I'll break that down a little bit because it's worth noting. Because I do believe not all markets are created equal. That's for sure. Real estate is very localized. Builder confidence, though, weak across the entire country, weak regionally, and I think until mortgage rates come down, it's probably not going to change anytime soon. That is it for me today. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. And as always, if you have questions or need specific advice, ideas, or just some help regarding your particular real estate needs or situation, or if you're just looking to buy or sell real estate in Florida, well then DM me on Instagram at the Salib Group, or just send me an email to mark@thesalibgroup.com. Don't forget to leave a rating for the show, follow, subscribe, help others find the show, and be informed and educated about the real estate market just like you. Until next time.